Board and recording. Cool. Okay. I'm going to give some prayer highlights here. Cheryl, we prayed for her uncle Harold a while back when he's 90 and he had a hip surgery. Now he's got shingles near his ear and it's turned into Bell's palsy. And so that's like almost like a stroke on one side, and he's having difficulty eating and drinking and talking. And he's just a tough old guy, but he asked for our prayers, and we're going to give them to him. We've got Scott and Kelly with ongoing pain, some days better than others. Julie's gonna go on a new medicine, so prayers that work. Continuous prayers for Lori Fisher, who is an artist in town who is dealing with very aggressive breast cancer. And then Sherry, who lives in Wimberley and also has a house here. She's getting married to David, who you guys have seen online and in person sometimes. And they have a ranch in Wimberley. That's where Sherry and David live when they're not down here. Anyhow, they share a driveway with his sister. And his sister's husband passed away, and I think he's in his 50s this week. So they are dealing with that this morning. And then we prayed last week for Jack, actually Z's brother, who was coming down to visit, and he tried to help somebody in Abilene, and someone was trying to help him with his truck, and they put the additive in the gas.
The diesel additive is supposed to go in a special little holder, and they put it in the gas tank.
And it's a new truck, and it's $35,000 worth of damage. And USAA says it wasn't an accident, and they're not going to pay for it. So he's down here today in Rockport visiting Jack and Z. So,
and then you done with those?
I am.
We
Sorry.
need to remember all of them, but I got to tell you a little story because it's part of our prayer today. I emailed back and forth with Kelly this week. You know, she's been in a lot of pain.
And she's on too.
I know that.
Okay.
But she'd had some issues, and then she was in a bad car accident, and I didn't know the details. The guy that hit her car was drugged up and drunk. He had been in multiple hit and runs that day. He had driven the wrong way down the highway for over a mile, and the woman that was driving Kelly's car sort of froze up, and they hit head on. And that's why Kelly is in such pain. And their government wants her to go testify, give like a victim impact statement. And she said the government is looking for an unprecedented sentence against this guy, 6 months.
I'll take it.
and I'm shocked, but this shows you things are not the same everywhere. She said in Canada, they just don't put people in jail for driving while impaired, no matter what. They don't put people in jail for domestic violence, she says. But 6 months is unprecedented. But she also said for every 3 months someone is sentenced to, they do 1 month. So the guy's looking at 2 months. They want Kelly to testify. Kelly is concerned about this man, and she wants us to pray for him. And is that a hard thing? So, I don't know. I told her we would, honor her request. It's obviously important to her. And she says she's going to, because if she does her victim impact statement and says anything about her concern for him, because of her belief, that's going to be an unpopular thing to do in Canada. So this should be interesting. We're told though we'll be given the words to say.
Amen.
Right.
And Scott, one more.
Yeah.
Monica, please, my friend Monica. We're fighting insurance company to try to get her chemo. No chemo, she dies quicker than with chemo. No guarantee.
I've been holding off because I always look for permission on those things. Yes. Monica, remember her, she's been battling cancer, and the insurance companies, as they seem to do a lot of, have stonewalled her for her treatments. So look for wisdom for both her and doctors, but certainly comfort in this time. We come humbled by what we see, by the fact that you allow us to come to you. You've heard all these ones we've named. Some of them we mention every single week. And we ask for the commitment to remember them in prayer when we're privately praying as well. Some of these, it's hard to know what to ask for. Some we're bold enough to ask for healing. For Kelly, we'll ask for the words when she goes to give her statement in a court that's not favorable to your word, to your worship. Kelly's asked for that. So that's what we expect to see. As we go now further into this study of Revelation, we see around us things that make us question. Give us the assurance that your word was intended for. Don't let us get lost in details that keep us away from the work we have to do. Amen.
Amen. Okay, we are on week 3 of the Revelation, and we're still not to the last book. So we're still in Daniel, and we are on Daniel chapter 11, and we left off at verse 35. But before we take up on that, we're going to set the stage with 2 issues. First, last week we talked about in Daniel 11:31, it was the second time it was mentioned, and it'll be mentioned one more time in the book of Daniel, and that is the abomination of desolation. And Scott?
Louise asked, there's somebody waiting to get in.
Okay. Oh, don't fall. Oh, they're in the car. Cool.
Oh, that's right. They're traveling.
Yeah, they're traveling. There we go.
Okay. So Louise asked a good question last week about this abomination of desolation. And I realized that there's still parts of it that are not clear to a lot of people. Abomination, you understand, is something that shouldn't happen, something that's unspeakable in its evil, or being contrary to what should happen. But desolation, Daniel hears about an abomination that causes desolation. Jesus talks about when you see the abomination that causes desolation. This is going to be the last week in Daniel. We will move to actual Revelation one way or another next week, but it's mentioned in Revelation as part of this end time. And the thing I want to stress about it is a lot of people have the idea that this Antichrist will come and destroy the temple, or gut it. What happens in Daniel's prophecy, we've told you there are 2. There was this guy named Antiochus that was near term, and he's sort of a model for the Antichrist. He sets himself up as a god, and he defiles the temple, and he prevents people from worshiping and sacrificing. But the desolation, here's the point I want to make about this. The desolation is not the temple. The word desolation means a sign of something that's emptiness, anguish, misery, or loneliness. It's something that is without hope. The desolation that this is going to cause is the people. When Antiochus did it, we see the effect it had on Israel. We saw that the leaders embraced it, and the people lost their contact with God, and they become empty, lonely, without hope. And that's what desolation is. When it comes to this time in Revelation, the desolation will be of the people, not of the temple itself. And if you want to know why, we keep coming back to these previous rulers who set themselves up as gods. Caesars did it, Antiochus did it. I don't know, there have been numerous others throughout time We read one last week where the ruler of Tyre had decreed himself a god. Why do we keep coming back to that ahead of this study of Revelation? And I'm going to skip ahead just one little bit into Revelation. I think everyone has heard about the mark of the beast. And you've also heard about this number. It's actually the number of the beast, 666. And a lot of people have tried to go and use numerology and say that it's a name, or, I mean, they're going to predict who this person is. And what it says in Revelation is that this number is the number of a man. Okay? But if you really read in the Greek, it's anthropos, and that can mean the number of mankind. Okay? 666. But in the Bible, in our scriptures, that 3 has a significance. That is God, that is fullness, completeness. 6 is associated with incompleteness, imperfection, and mankind, right? Mankind. And so if you look at this, the number 6, which is mankind and evil, repeated 3 times, I'm utterly convinced is man trying to make himself God. And it's been repeated throughout history. These other ones have been, lead-ins. They've been minor versions of what we're going to see when this Antichrist, this great one, comes. He's going to be doing the same things that other people have tried to do, but he's going to be more successful at it. But this is, and one of the things it says is that people who don't take the mark will be unable to buy or sell. And we're going to get to it again when we do get to Revelation starting next week. But this idea of being unable to buy or sell has troubled people for a long, long time. But with the technology we have now, the ability to track payments and to track you and to say you can't buy anything unless I got told I had to get an app before I could get a new debit card, that kind of thing. The ability to get you pulled into it. Man attempting to make himself God. That's why we have kept coming back to that, because ultimately that's the mark and the number of the beast. That's what the Antichrist does, is to try and set himself up once and for all as if he's a god. We're going to talk more about it, but that's why we keep coming back. That's why we started in Daniel, because we want to preface some of what we're going to get to, so when we see it, you understand it for what it is.
So when we left off, like I said, we left off in Daniel chapter 11, verse 35. And from verse 27 to verse 35, that was a near-term prophecy that we talked about last week of Antiochus. And Antiochus was a evil leader.
We've covered it. Yeah.
Okay. And so that when we start on 36, this is a prophecy, but it has not happened yet.
And that's why also we want you to understand that foreshadowings in prophecy become important, because this Antiochus was like a model for the Antichrist that's to come. And starting in 35 or 36, you're going to see some reasons why most people are fairly confident that this switches. And now from 36 on, it's a prophecy of the end time.
So then the king will do as he pleases and will exalt and magnify himself above every god. And he will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been decreed must be accomplished. He will show no regard for the gods of his father, nor for the one desired by women, nor for any other god, because he will magnify himself above them all. And in their place, he will honor a god of fortresses, a God his father did not know, with gold, silver, precious stone, riches. He will attack the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god and will greatly honor those who acknowledge him, making them rulers over many and distributing the land for a price.
There's a couple of reasons you see in there why I and so many people believe this is now the end time Antichrist. It says he'll do as he pleases, magnify himself above every god. But it also says he'll be successful until the time of wrath is completed. Now, that's clearly not Antiochus. The first part dealt with Antiochus. It's an uncanny prophecy. But the time of wrath, now we're talking about the end time, till the time of wrath is completed. For what has been decreed must be accomplished. And here I'll break away for just a second. I hear people talking about things going on today and saying, oh, we have to stop this. This is going to lead us straight to the end times. Let's suppose it's true. Do you think you're going to be able to stop it? This, what's been decreed, must be accomplished. No kidding. Good luck trying, and people, we develop this kind of bizarre sense of our own importance and our own power over things. And so let's stop the electronic, the AI stuff, because that'll prevent the end time. No, it won't. Okay, it won't. Not only that, you're not going to stop it. So it doesn't mean we have to embrace, it doesn't mean we have to participate, but we're not going to stop this. And if it's time, it's time. So, abandon that way of thinking. Kind of put the little tripwire in your mind. If you catch yourself thinking, oh, we've got to get legislation to stop something because it's leading us to the end time, well, get used to it. Don't adopt it. Don't embrace it, but you're not going to stop the end times. You're not going to stave this off. Says he will show no regard for other gods. And basically it says he's going to have access to great wealth. We see in Revelation, it appears he's going to set himself up in Jerusalem, or in Israel, but in Jerusalem. And I believe personally, and we're going to get to it when we get to Revelation, but he's going to come in, he's going to sound eminently reasonable, something that people will love the sound of. And he's going to talk about bringing peace. And he's going to talk about, I think, probably, look, you see how much trouble religion has caused. And we've progressed to the point we don't need that stuff anymore. We are the only God we need. And he's going to come in with flattery, we're told. That seems like a perfectly good pretense. And to do that in Jerusalem makes a lot of sense. There's just been constant war and rumors of war. And he's going to say, look, let's end all this. I'm going to bring peace. So this looks very much like it has to be the end time prophecy of the Antichrist himself.
It says in verse 39, he will attack the strongest fortresses with help of a foreign god.
It seems likely that literally talks about Satan himself. That the reason ultimately will be more successful is because he's going to have help, the kind of direct help that no one before him has had. But then it also says he will. Did I skip ahead? Oh no, the help of a foreign god, and greatly honor those who acknowledge him, making them rulers over many and distributing the land for a price. In other words, the people who support him, the people who get on board, he is going to have access to all the wealth and all the political power, and he's going to reward them. And people are going to say, hey, this is working out really good for me, right? This is going to be at the beginning. And he's going to make a lot of people very happy for the first half of this time.
And we don't know if it's a he or if it's a person.
And we can talk about that. I tried to make it clear that in prophecy, this kind of prophecy, a lot of things are symbolic, but there's some reason to think it doesn't have to be a single man. It'll probably be a leader that's a single man, but it could be an entity. It could be something like the United Nations. And he speaks with the authority of a group. I think there will be one man at the head, but still the beast may well not be a single individual.
Verse 40. At the time of the end, the king of the south will engage him in battle, but the king of the north will storm out against him with chariots, horsemen, and many ships, invading many countries and sweeping through them like a flood. He will also invade the beautiful land, and many countries will fall, but these will be delivered from his hand: Edom, Moab, and the leaders of the Ammonites.
So what this says is that a lot of people will line up with him, but there will be resistance. And the king of the north and the king of the south, that's you'd have to speculate at this point. And there's lots of good speculation. I don't find it especially needful to understand, but there will be resistance to him. And when it talks about in Revelation, it talks about he acquires the riches of Egypt and Libya, and I forgot one of the other places, especially Libya. What's their wealth? Oil. And you can imagine that at this end time, the importance of that Arab oil and the wealth of the Arab oil.
And that's in here, the next one.
Okay, it's in the next. Okay, we'll go ahead then.
Okay, verse 42. He will extend his power over many countries, and not even the land of Egypt will escape. He will gain control over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the riches of Egypt and the Libyans and Cushites, and will also submit to him.
So this, you see things that we will see again in Revelation. The parallel is too striking. He has switched over to, this is now, he's being given a prophecy of the end time. And you can see that even though this guy has tremendous power, he doesn't have all power because there are people that are going to resist him. It would make perfect sense to me that the people who currently control the oil wealth are going to stand up to him. It's not going to be all roses, but what is important, and this is where I think we should pay attention. When Antiochus took over the temple and defiled it, there were Jews, especially the leaders, who got on board with it. I told you last week, they wind up bribing Antiochus for the right to become the high priest, stuff like that. When we lived in Israel, something like 95% of the country is atheist. We thought we were moving to a religious country. We didn't. And we would, in conversation here, if you get in a conversation here about God, someone may tell you, well, I'm an atheist. But when we lived there, we had people that would just in the middle of a conversation proactively tell you, I'm an atheist. The country is incredibly secular right now. It is incredibly atheistic. And this Antichrist coming in with the right sort of message is something a lot of them would embrace. A lot of them. It seems reasonable. It seems like we've transcended the need for a God. And the idea of Israel and of Jerusalem jumping on board with him becomes very important in the book of Revelation.
You find their leaders now to be the same? Because, they profess that this is our land. We have, they may not make reference to the Bible or to God, but they say, this is our land and we're supposed to be here, in other words. And so, I find that rather interesting.
I kind of stay away. If somebody tells me, I hear them say the words, I do not believe in God, I believe them. If you're bold enough to say it, I believe you. I try, though, not to judge somebody else's relationship with God. I will say that when we work for the company, they have paid for lunches for all the employees. They had a cafeteria. And that's very commonplace. It's sort of very socialistic.
They pay for cars and they pay for your cars. Our car was paid for, our gas was paid for, and we had meals every single day at work.
Every day, free in the cafeteria. But on Shabbat, the meals are kosher. When we went on a company outing, the meal was kosher. Even though, right, 95% of the people say, I'm an atheist.
It's such a strange country because those who are religious are so devout. I mean, so we knew some believers, some very staunch Jewish believers, and they were believers in the Jewish faith.
So
Yeah.
what do I think about their leaders? If I just absolutely had to guess, I would say a lot of them are not, they do not believe or value God. But if you ask me about any individual, I'm not going to comment.
Right. No,
It's
no,
not
no,
what I do.
that. But you know, the statement you made earlier about the abomination that causes desolation.
Yes.
So, you know, to me, it sort of brings desecration of the temple. And then I take to heart what you said, that the desolation is not the entity of the physical structure, it's what happens in the believers.
That's
And
exactly.
so then to me, that brings to mind the idea, and I'm not trying to say nothing here, but about how religiosity and ritualistic behavior does not impart anything to it. And that's the only reason why I would say that, as you say, if the desolation, the abomination that causes desolation is imparted to the believer because they think, oh, they've desecrated the temple, so I'm not going to go to the temple. So then it's like we do this ritualistic thing constantly. Then what are we doing? Is that some way that they believe that they're
In this
religious?
country, if you ask people, do you believe in God? It is some amazingly large percentage who will say, yes, I do. I suspect the percentage is a whole lot lower. So what are those other people doing? Why do they embrace that? You know, we're getting into some other areas right now. What's going on in Israel is what it will go on in Israel during Revelation will be different. But I think what this Antichrist is going to offer is an opportunity to drop all pretense and just say, there is no God, publicly, openly, proactively, okay? And you can see what that might do to the hearts and the well-being of the people. It becomes a place without hope. And it even says in Revelation, they won't understand it, but other people will. So
It would be a place with hope that's been sold out, not with God. They're going to do the nice power structure, the money structure. They're going to buy into the system. There is no God. They become little gods.
the Beatitudes has one of the Beatitudes says, the meek shall inherit the earth. And I say it a few times a year. There are people who say, well, that's very cool. You can have it when I'm done with it, right? And so putting your faith and your hope in something that's transient, in something that never satisfies. You ever notice there are people who can't possibly get enough wealth because it never satisfies? So what goes on in the heart is a lot different than what people say they're doing. And what we're describing, what this prophecy deals with, what Jesus's prophecy deals with, and what the Revelation deals with, is a time where people finally, this magnificent leader comes, and I believe will say, we have transcended the need for God completely. We are all the God we will ever need. And that brings an emptiness. The people who don't understand it would laugh at what I'm saying. They would mock what I'm saying. And you either have to believe it or not believe it, but I believe it brings an emptiness, a desolation of the soul, of the spirit of humanity. And what we see in Revelation is going to be that for a while it all seems good, and then it begins to really rear its ugly head. Let's move on with this.
Verse 44. But news from the east and the north will alarm him, and he will go out with great fury to destroy many and devote them to destruction. He will pitch his royal tents between the sea and the beautiful holy mountains, but he will meet his end with no one to help him.
That last part is part of the prophecy that eventually the Antichrist is defeated. But this thing about pitching his tents between the sea and the beautiful holy mountains, you've all heard about the Battle of Armageddon, right? There's a place in Israel called Megiddo. And Megiddo sits out on a plain, and up to the north are mountains. It's where, you know, Syria and Lebanon and all those people are. And the sea is on the other side. And you've heard about Armageddon. That word is actually Har Megiddo. Har means mountains or hills, and Megiddo has been this strategically important place over thousands of years. The Battle of Har Megiddo, the battle of the hills above Megiddo, right? And they say that if you really wanted to deliver a kind of final blow against Israel, part of it would have to be to come sweeping out of the hills around the bottom of the Sea of Galilee and straight into the plain of Megiddo. So that's what's being prophesied. The Battle of Armageddon is actually the battle of the plain underneath the hills of Megiddo, Har Megiddo.
And it's an incredible place. We went there the last weekend before we went home after living there for a year. And it is just...
It's a little chilling to be at Megiddo.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's really chilling. Chapter 12. At that time, Michael, the great prince who stands watch over your people, will rise up.
And we're going to stop there. Can you tell we rehearsed this week?
Yeah, I did.
Michael, the great prince. We talked last week about the prince of Persia, the prince of Greece, these fallen angels, these beings who sort of watch over certain areas. This prophecy, this angel reveals to Daniel, Michael, the great prince. You notice he calls him a great prince, not an archangel. It reinforces this idea that we in the human realm are influenced by these princes, yes? But Michael is the great prince that watches over your people, Israel. Now, Israelites, the Jews, have been uncannily successful, and they have been uncannily resilient. I mean, no matter what gets done to them, they seem to come through it. People go to war against them, and they wind up taking all their tanks and weapons away from them. And, you know, I mean, it just seems like
they're just little countries.
And they're just little, but they have been uncanny in their success and their resilience. And here you have a prophecy with an angel, a very powerful one, telling Daniel that Michael is the great prince who watches over your people. That also becomes an issue later in Revelation.
The second half of 12:1. There will be a time of distress, the likes of which will not have occurred from the beginning of nations until that time. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered.
So there's several things in here. First of all, a time of distress, unlike anything the world has ever seen. That's another reason that we're pretty confident this is end time prophecy, not something about Antiochus. This is what's going to happen. But I want you to consider something when we get to Revelation, and I want you to hear it now before we get there. There will be people who believe during this tribulation period. The word we've used is saved. There will be people who come to believe in Christ during this bad time. Over the whole course of the Old Testament, Israel fell away and they were corrected, if not punished. They were put in bondage, they led off into exile. They were taken over by foreign countries. When they leave Yahweh, he gets their attention. And the prophets always come and say, repent. turn back to God, and he'll be here waiting for you. And they experience a time of plenty, of safety. Okay. And then of course they turn away again. That's the story of the Old Testament. But during this tribulation, I'm again going to jump ahead because I want you to have heard this before we get there. There will be people, you've probably been taught that this tribulation period is God's punishment. God pulls all the good people out and he just punishes the bad people to death. I believe that this tribulation period is last call. It is one last call to people. And through history, when they go through the bad times and they see the signs and wonders, they realize and they turn back to God. At least some of them do. And we're told in Revelation, people will do that during the 3.5 years. So rather than look at the tribulation, at least the first half, as being all punishment, I believe it is, in fact, last call. And what we see is for 3.5 years, there will be people who come to believe. And when the last person who's going to heed the call has believed and confessed and accepted, then it's going to change. That's when things start getting really, really bad. And what do you expect? You're now dealing with a people who will not repent, who will not accept God at all. And that's a different sort of people. That's a different sort of humanity. And things get ugly without all of the things that look like the plagues on Egypt. So what I'm trying to get to before we get to Revelation is maybe to change your mindsets from some things we've been told. Because we see in Revelation, there will be people who believe. There will be people who are saved during at least the first 3.5 years, right? It's probably different from what you've been told, but you're going to see when we go to Revelation, it's what it says. It's just what it says.
So I'm going to read, excuse me, it says here in verse 1, there will be a time of distress like the likes of which have not occurred from the beginning of nations until that time. I'm going to read one more time. We read it last week, but I want to read Matthew chapter 24, starting at verse 15. This is Jesus on the Mount of Olives talking to the 12, and he's teaching them. And he says, so when you see standing in the holy place the abomination of desolation described by the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop come down to retrieve anything from his house, and let no one in the field return for his cloak. How miserable those days will be for pregnant and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not occur in the winter or on the Sabbath. For at that time there will be great tribulation, unmatched from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be seen again. In those days, if those days had not been cut short, nobody would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders that would deceive even the elect, if that were possible. So I have told you in advance.
So you see how Jesus' own words mirror what you hear in Daniel. And I believe Daniel is given this prophecy with the full knowledge that Jesus is going to say this, but also that John is going to have the revelation that he receives that says absolutely the same thing. And it remains consistent over thousands of years. Now, I do want to mention this abomination that causes desolation in the holy place. And everyone assumes that means the temple will be rebuilt. And everyone assumes because right now where the temple used to be is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, right? And they say, well, that means that's going to be torn down and the temple is going to be rebuilt there. But I'm starting to hear rumblings, and I haven't had time to go really dig it out yet, but rumblings about the finding of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was always in the tabernacle, which was the first temple, and then Solomon builds it. But what if they drag out the Ark of the Covenant? And what if they put it in a tabernacle because they have created replica tabernacles? Does that become the holy place? Is it necessary that the Al-Aqsa Mosque be blown up and a temple be built in its place? Because this has hung people up over long, long periods of time. Well, how could that possibly happen? How could you not be allowed to buy or sell? That can't be right, because you can always buy or sell. Well, no, not if you have to pay electronically and they cut you off. How about the rebuilding of the temple? If they drag out the Ark of the Covenant and put it in a tabernacle, does that become the holy place? I don't know, but you have to leave room for possibilities like that. These kinds of prophecies are not here to give you a cookbook so that you can come down and figure out the exact name of people and the hour and the day and what countries and everything else. We're supposed to see the flow of things as they draw to the end, as Jesus returns and sets things right. But I think that it is quite possible that when you see the abomination that causes desolation in the holy place, it may not be a rebuilt temple in the site because Solomon's temple wasn't always there, was it? No, it came fairly late in the game. So yes, sir. Were you about to say something? Oh,
I will.
okay.
So the Wailing Wall currently,
Yes,
is that not part of what used to be the temple?
it is the some of the foundation stones. Yes.
Okay. How proximal is it to the mosque of the Rock?
If you stand at the Wailing Wall and look up, that's where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is. Yeah, it is the steps. You know, they said there would not be a one stone left on top of another. When they destroyed the temple, they did a really good job of it. But they're big stones. The Romans, yes. But there are steps that lead up to it that you know, the site where the temple was, it's all going to happen right there.
Do you have an idea when the mosque was built?
Al-Aqsa, I should. You know, Islam doesn't come into existence until the 600s, and that we won't get into the formation of Islam. But Al-Aqsa, I don't remember when exactly it was built. Yeah.
It seems funny that they would leave that remnant behind, but anyway. No,
Well, the wall, if you're there, you realize that the Wailing Wall, there's a bunch of rocks and stuff. I mean, this thing was thrown down, and they're there at the base of the old temple. Look, and you can't get rid of stones that big. I mean, I don't know. You'd have to have a lot of dynamite. So they're standing there at the rubble, able to look up and know where it used to be. It all makes perfect sense if you're there.
Verse 2, and many who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, but others to shame and everlasting contempt. Then the wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever and ever.
This goes to what we looked at last week, that they used as the basis for the rapture. Those who sleep in the dust of the earth will be raised. They'll rise. Some to you know, they'll shine like the stars, and some to everlasting contempt. That says heaven and hell. It just says that. You're going to see that it says that in Revelation as well. But here, this is this end time prophecy, and it's so consistent through history. You know, he says there's going to be a judgment. There's going to be a separation. The prophecy that Daniel gets says that people, and why is that such a concern? There are within, you know, Jewish divisions. The Sadducees, for instance, said, when you die, that's it. Well, if I'm getting a prophecy that says everything's going to come out okay, but I'm dead, that might seem concerning to me. Well, so what? I'm not going to be around to see it. And what this prophecy is telling Daniel, look, the people that are dead will also, the ones who are believers, the ones who are faithful, are going to be a part of this. and the ones who reject him are going to be on the other side of it. But the ones who have already died, they're going to be involved. So you see what this prophecy to Daniel is doing, and it's going to look so much like things we see in Revelation, so much like.
But you, Daniel, shut up these words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many will roam to and fro, and knowledge will increase.
So let's start with the last part of that. Many will roam to and fro, and knowledge will greatly increase. Does that sound like today? It sounds like today. The internet, wisdom may not have increased.
But
But
knowledge.
knowledge is incredible. I can know things within 10 seconds just by going to Google, right? People will move to and fro. Oh my gosh, never like this. So it looks like today, but you see how the prophecy works. But he tells him, this angel tells him, seal up some of the things you've seen. It doesn't say, don't tell about this prophecy. Daniel wouldn't have told it. I don't think he would have been allowed to tell it if he wasn't supposed to. But there are portions of it he's told not to tell. When we get to Revelation, you're going to see that late in the game, John is receiving this revelation. He is there physically. He's there in spirit. But he's told at one point not to write down some of what he sees. Yeah. These bowls, they're like, some of them are very much like the plagues in Israel. You'll recognize them. But when these angels pour out the 7 bowls, there's one in particular where there's great thunder, it says. And John is told, don't record what the thunder says, right? This idea of don't tell everything. Now, I'm going to submit to you because you're part of this world, because we live among people who love to speculate on revelation. And they want to tease out every single detail. They want to know exactly how and if Daniel was told, don't tell all of it, don't you think there's part of it that's hidden from us? And if John is told in his receiving of the revelation, don't tell part of it, don't you think there's part of it that's hidden from us? Do you really think you're going to go in and logic out things they were told not to even speak of? You're not going to do that. And that's why I insisted that before we get to Revelation, we talk, because people lose themselves in a study of Revelation. And they think if we get and look at all the clues, we can figure out the parts that aren't specified. Don't do that. That's a foolish, childish game.
And you
Right?
always ask the question, if you knew it, would you do something different?
This, and I've mentioned it before, but in the corporate world, I've had CEOs and presidents of the company say, I want you to give me this information. And I said, what would you do with it if you had it? And Mary was reading from a book yesterday while we drove. That was the Messianic Jew that teaches this stuff. And he says that some people will say there are things in here that are just not that relevant. And he gets very incensed. Every single thing in the Bible is relevant. And I'm thinking, let's look at Daniel for a minute. Daniel receives this prophecy. Is there anything that you see in this prophecy that would have caused Daniel to do something, to behave differently than he was already behaving? Nope. Daniel's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He receives a prophecy that should be reassurance that your people are not going to go away and that God wins in the end. It's the same thing with the revelation, right? But there are portions of revelation that we don't understand. And I promise you, there is nothing in Revelation that's going to give you new marching orders. If there's something you're currently not doing, Revelation isn't going to go spell out for you. It's not like turn the other cheek, love your neighbor as yourself. You look at Revelation, and what we're specifically told not to do is to try and predict the end time so we can wait till the last minute before we start behaving ourselves. We have work to do. We have, a great commission. We have instructions. We're supposed to be God's hands and feet in this world. Yes? There's nothing in Revelation. There's nothing you're going to see in Revelation that's going to suggest to you any new behaviors, anything that you're going to see in there and you think, wow, I should do this, you should already be doing it. You're not going to learn anything new there.
Okay, now we're now
I think, Scott, it also leaves that vacuum from Daniel, from Revelation. That's the individual faith base. You've got to believe, otherwise you're going to miss the whole thing. You cannot learn it. You have to believe it.
Well, isn't that true? Yeah, and there are people who simply, we're told all over, there are people who simply will not understand. Some will refuse to understand, and maybe all that don't. But you're right. And you're gonna be pleased when we get to Revelation, because the idea of faith is going to become very, very important. We're almost done.
Yeah.
Can we try and finish?
Yeah. Verse 5. So now the prophecy is over. It's Daniel talking. Then I, Daniel, looked and saw two others standing there, one on the bank of the river and one on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man dressed in linen, who was above the water of the river, how long will the fulfillment of these wonders? How long until the fulfillment of these wonders? And the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, raised his right hand and his left hand towards heaven. And I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time and times and a half a time, when the power of the holy people has finally been shattered, all these things will be completed.
We're almost done, I promise. Time, times, and half a time, 3.5 years. That 3.5 years just figures large over and over, and it will in Revelation. For half that 7 years, the Antichrist is going to look like a good guy. For the other half, not so much. Things are going to begin to break down. But you notice he says, when the power of the holy people has finally been shattered. And that's where I'm telling you that I believe the last person who's going to come to believe and accept will believe and accept. And after that point, nobody else, I don't think, but certainly it's going to be a time where the world is ripe for the influence of Satan, and this guy is going to be revealed for what he really is.
Verse 8, I heard, but I did not understand. So I asked, my Lord, what will the outcome of these things? Go on your way, Daniel, he replied, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to act wickedly. None of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand. And from the time the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. But as for you, go on your way until the end. You will rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days.
So first of all, Daniel asked, give me some more details. What's going to be the outcome? How's it actually going to give me all the, that's the game that people are playing today that I keep talking about. And the angel tells him, go on your way, Daniel. I've told you all I'm going to tell you. I've told you enough. You have everything you need to know. Move along. But he says, I will say that it's going to be, and here he plays there's some numbers that play out that I don't have a clue.
What we do know is that 3.5 years is 1,260 days. So he gives something that's going to happen 30 days after the 3.5 years, and then another 45, or a total of 75 days. And there's a whole bunch of people speculate about it, and we don't know.
What you can't see is that Mary's over here doing this thing that says you need to stop talking. I'm going to interject. 3.5 years is 1,260. That's provided you're on the Gregorian calendar,
Okay.
right? And of course, the Jews have a lunar calendar. We know that it's 3.5 years. We know that some things happen at the end of that. I don't know what those numbers mean. I just don't. I can see 3.5 years in there, and that's what's important to me, that if I need to understand anything, I see the consistency of the 3.5 years. 1,290, 1,335. I don't know. But as for you, go on your way until the end. You will rest and you will arise to your inheritance at the end of days. Look at the beauty of the end of that. First of all, he says, he's already told them, I'm not telling you all the details. You don't get that. You know everything you need to know. Be on your way. But he tells them the last part, and he says, as for you, Daniel, as for you, go on your way until the end. You will rest. You will sleep. You will die. Okay? You will rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of days. That's what you need to know. Daniel, that's what you need to know. And the people who read this, that's what they need to know. And the people who read Revelation, that's what they need to know. It all comes out the same. Get about your business. You've got things to do. When your time comes, you'll rest in the dirt of the earth like everyone else, but you're going to rise at the end. You'll arise to your inheritance at the end of days. It's the same story. It's Revelation. We get a little bit more detail, and if we let it, it could be frightening. It shouldn't be. This last piece, you should take that last paragraph, go to your favorite Bible app, okay, print it out, put it on the fridge or on your monitor or something on your computer. As for you, go on your way until the end. You'll rest and you will arise to your inheritance at the end of days. Great way to finish, don't you think?
Is that still Gabriel talking? Is that right?
We assume it's Gabriel, but yes, it is. That is the angel speaking to him. And that is the final word to Daniel. Look, you've had all of this revealed. You were here praying and confessing for your people, and you're concerned about your people. And God sent me to tell you a message. This is deep in the future, Daniel. Don't sweat it. For now, go about your business, do what you know what needs to be done, and you're gonna die before this happens. You're going to arise to your inheritance at the end of days. That's our message. And that's, even though we're gonna get into some other weird stuff in Revelation, that's our message. God, we are thankful. We're grateful. We see in your words constantly reminders of your love for us, but also of our need for drawing close to you. And you have, through the ages, sought to bring people to you. We're thankful for that. We're thankful for the reassurance that we get from these. But this week, my thing I would ask above everything else is the reminder of those final words to go on about our business, to realize that we have things to do while our time is still here, regardless of what comes in our lifetime or after our lifetime. We have a mission here in this life. Remind us of that this week. Amen.
Thank you, guys. And those of you who didn't hear, Christmas party, December 8th, put it on your calendar. And
we look forward. We look forward to it every year. We love. Some of you come from out of town that we don't normally get to see. It's a great time. If you can possibly be here, we would love to see you.
And I'm sure we can figure out for those of you who are coming in for someplace for you to stay. So let me know if you want to come in. As far as the list, I am working on the list. I hope by this afternoon to send out an email sharing addresses. So I am almost finished with that list. So that is my to-do list this afternoon. And if you didn't give me your address and you're online, text it to me rather than put it in the notes, because I can't see the notes afterwards. So I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.